Boom.
It's going to be hard to keep straight what we already talked about because the episode that we recorded at BlizzCon hasn't come out, but we're recording another one because it's going to be the holidays before we know it, and things feel crazy, and I'm already in a panic, and it's not even December.
Andrew.
Is somebody playing Christmas music yet?
Actually, I have already seen multiple Christmas commercials on TV, and it kills me.
I'm just waiting to hear some Black Friday deals, see if we're going to be getting ourselves a Switch. You know what I mean?
There are some of those that are coming out. I guess we should say this is episode 80, I believe, of We Were Gamers, a podcast.
I had a little bit of time to think about this.
Uh-huh.
It's a podcast about being 30 and gaming.
Okay.
Right? It's like gaming at 30 plus.
Oh, are we like inventing a new tagline here live?
I don't know.
Okay. Cool.
What do you think?
It sounds good.
Yeah. I'm not sold. I was driving in the car today. I was like, the pod is really just about getting older.
I mean, you could make an argument that would say life is just about getting older, right?
Well, now that we've gotten all the metaphysics out of the way.
A podcast about philosophy.
Oh, man. BlizzCon was fun. We just talked about it 2 days ago-ish. But we're recording a little early, like I mentioned, because we have some holidays coming up, and we're going to have to pre-record a few podcasts.
Yeah, and, the wrap-up, so if you're interested in the details of everything that we did at BlizzCon and how rad it all was, go back and listen to that episode. Yeah.
It was a lot of fun, despite the last-minute destruction of Andrew's hopes that he could actually collect something Blizzard-related and be successful at it. Yeah, well, the standard is that nothing is attainable, right? It's true. It's true. One thing I learned at BlizzCon that I did not put in the other podcast. We thought about it at Comic-Con, and I said I would test it at BlizzCon, and I actually did. Street Pass is dead, sir. Oh? What? So what made you decide to put the nail in the fold-open coffin? 3 days. I kept it on me all the days. I kept checking it to move people to the line. 35 passes over 3 days with 10 duplicates. So really 25 unique people had Street Pass or had 3DSs on them. Yep. Over the course of a whole convention. Yep. They added a lot more computers and stuff to different spaces, and we hardly ever stood in lines long enough that I got the 3DS out to do anything on it. Yeah, there was only maybe 2 times, I think, in the whole convention we really stood in a line that warranted having enough time to pull it out. Yeah, I saw people on their Switches in those lines, and that was fine. But I could have gotten by without even thinking about it. And apparently everyone else has come to that conclusion as well. Well, I think that, if we had been more interested in doing the World of Warcraft demos, I think we might have had more time to kill on our hands. Or if we wanted to do that Mythic Dungeon, it sounded like the line for that was quite a bit longer. Yeah, I feel like that wouldn't have been even close to successful. No, it wouldn't have. Given that we could barely handle ourselves questing, I don't know how we would possibly do a dungeon. I literally could not handle myself questing. I died so multiple times. Yeah. Oh, man. I at least was glad that I brought it so you could see the veracity of my statement that I am having an impossible time beating that one boss in Bravely Default. Yeah, he seems like he's a real jerk. I tried a few times today, and I am now officially ready to write it off and move on to the final chapter of the story. All right. Well, I will be interested to hear how you enjoy that as you move forward. Yep. Yeah, well. I thought it was going to be cool to have gotten further than you did on that part and tell you what happened. But yeah, you definitely got farther than me. I didn't even get through the door, so. Yeah. Oh, well. So Bravely Default updates coming soon. But I think you had one more post-BlizzCon update, right? Yeah, so BlizzCon now has ended, and it sounds like the employees of Blizzard Entertainment have gotten back to work and have then rolled out some of the things that they promised to come after BlizzCon already. Wow.
People that want to try that new Overwatch hero, I believe she's available on the test realm as of the time that we're recording this. So certainly by the time anyone hears it, I'm sure everyone will have already formed an opinion about how good or bad she is. And I think the map is there as well, although I don't remember if I saw it there or not.
Oh, I hope it is, because I would boot that up just to walk around the thing.
Yeah, it may be, since I think all of that was planned to go in the same thing. So, those Overwatch fans, go ahead and check that out. The map was really cool when we played it, so highly recommended it. And it sounded like that hero was pretty good.
More so than any other map, it seems to have just stuff packed in every corner that you really want to look at.
Yeah, and even if you were deep into the Overwatch lore, I don't know how much of that you're going to get here, but you certainly are going to get a lot of Blizzard stuff here, and that's cool. And Hearthstone also pushed out an update today where they gave everyone a free legendary card, a brand new uncraftable legendary named Marin the Fox. So he is live and out there now, and you can play with him today. I played a couple of games before we recorded this, and that card is really silly. It's very slow. I mean, he costs 8, right? And then he summons a 0 attack, 8 health treasure chest with a death rattle on the opponent's side. And if you kill that chest, you get one of several awesome cards that do some really, really powerful stuff.
It seems like a lot of the stuff they showed off at the con was slow stuff, like that Warlock card that makes 6 more cards. And
right. The 70 mana, whatever.
Yeah, just stuff that'll never get played.
Well, Marin the Fox is definitely playable. You need to sort of goose your deck a little bit. Maybe be a priest so that you can kill it immediately, or play the cards that switch attack and health. Since they only cost 8, you can play those guys for 2, and then you get the card immediately. You can do some stuff. Also note that if your opponent plays N'Zoth, the chest has a death rattle and will come back with N'Zoth.
What?
Yeah, so it's kind of a nerf to their N'Zoth because it dies on their side of the board so that you get a second card.
I mean, a nerf to a wild card. Meh.
I mean, there are still N'Zoth decks in Standard, but yeah, they're not great.
Yeah.
The funniest stuff that I've seen involves Warlocks. Since Warlocks have a card that now let you... it's 3 mana, and you give one of your minions to the opponent. People that play Marin, you give the treasure chest, they put it on your side, and then you hand the treasure chest back to them and then kill it. So now you get the card and they don't. Among a bunch of other pretty silly shenanigans you can do with that, where like there's one thing that you can do to make them discard a bunch of cards out of their hand by handing them one of your minions. It's some stuff like that. It is a fun card. Jury is out on whether it maybe is actually a good card or not.
I don't really specifically have a one-liner for the end of our BlizzCon thing when we're not sitting out, in loud, noisy spaces, but I enjoyed my time. Despite a few disappointments, overall I'd say it was a better con than last year.
Yeah, I think the new convention space really made a big difference.
Yeah, and we didn't get to talk about the concert because we hadn't seen it yet, but that was pretty good too. Yeah,
it definitely was. I ended up liking it a lot more than I thought that I might.
I've always been, well, I can't say that. I think I've been to 9 BlizzCons. I'm not entirely certain of that stat. And I'm pretty sure that 8 of the 9 times I've been very happy with the band.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly how many I've been to. It's slightly less than you because there's at least one year where I didn't go to the concert. But the bands in general have all been great.
I think that this is a good opportunity to bring up another card game that I had no idea was doing an event.
Oh?
Gwent is having something called Soavine.
I did not know.
The Soavine holiday event with undead elves. Elven tradition holds on Soavine's Eve. The dead crawl out of their graves and demand food.
Okay, so this is like a Hallows Eve, Halloween kind of event.
Yeah, it keeps going through most of November. It looks like
okay,
kind of a holiday of the dead sort of thing going on.
Well, I really enjoyed the last festival that Gwent had, the Ale Festival.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot of fun to do those single player challenges and stuff. So maybe I will boot up Gwent again and give that a try. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's like looks like challenges and puzzles. Basically, like last time, you play the cards in the right orders, otherwise you don't win.
Yeah, that stuff was cool. I enjoyed it, and there was like cards at the end of that too. So I will be interested in checking it out.
I think it's time to hit an email first.
All right, we got some emails.
Yeah, we got some emails, and I think we'll finish up with gaming one, and then we'll do a different one. But in response to our podcast about loot boxes and values they hold in possibly single-player games,
mm-hmm.
We got a response mentioning that loot boxes in single-player games might not mean much to us as people looking inward, but they certainly probably mean a lot for streamers when people are facing them on the stream and they see their characters playing, right? So if someone's playing a Assassin's Creed game, like let's say the new one added loot boxes, and everyone starts to wonder why their assassin looks different than the one that they get to play with, and possibly that there is a reason to have loot boxes in single player games. It increases revenue for streamers and companies alike.
Okay. I'm confused as to how that really increases the streamer's revenue, but I mean, I get the idea that maybe the streamer wants to be unique or whatever, or, you know, have some kind of cool flair on their stuff. So
yeah, if they're known for having a standout character, right? Like certain Counter-Strike players are known because of their weapons, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I get that. Cool. I think that is a good point. I think I could still stand to do without them, but you know, I see that that is good for the people that want it.
I think it still comes back to the main point about pure cosmetics versus things like Shadow of War, where it's locking up parts of the game.
Yeah, I think what you don't want to have happen is actually sort of similar to what Diablo 3 went through back when it first came out and the auction house existed. You don't want to have people feel like the progression in a game is locked up behind getting random drops, and if you can't get good random drops, then having to pay for them, and that sucks.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, and I'm sure the developers of those games know that too, hopefully, and they try not to make that stuff essential.
Transfer us into another topic by doing another one?
Yeah, sure. More emails are good. If you wanted to send us an email, you could send it to podcast@weweregamers.com, and we would read it.
This one's specifically targeted at somebody on this podcast.
Okay, well, there's only two of us, so let's find out who this is.
What are your thoughts on Snoop and Martha?
Oh, yes. Okay. I know who this is targeted at, and it's me. Because this is a show. Andrew, do you know what this is?
I have no idea what this is, and I think this is going to lead us into we're kind of a multimedia podcast sometimes. We're like, yeah, we were gamers, but sometimes we like to sit back and watch movies and not think about games, or TV in some cases, or in some cases maybe bad TV. I assume this is a TV show.
It is indeed a TV show, and I would declare that it is not bad. It is glorious.
Glorious?
It's great. The name of the show is, I believe it is Snoop and Martha's Potluck Dinner Party. It's on VH1.
Okay.
I assume somewhere or there you can find streams of it or something, because if you've never seen this show, it is great. It is
probably the most popular show VH1 has going.
I have no idea, but I know that I enjoy watching this show.
Okay.
It is ostensibly formatted somewhat like a Martha Stewart cooking kind of show. They don't really spend a lot of time on the actual cooking parts of it.
Okay.
But it'll be like it is, Snoop and Martha host a dinner party. They have there's a literal line down the center of the stage where one half of the counter that they stand behind is all Snoopified, and the other side looks like Martha's kitchen, and Snoop's kitchen is all purple and has silly lights and car grills and stuff on it, and Martha's is all like gleaming white and very tastefully decorated or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then every episode starts like they're hosting a dinner party, so they put together a cocktail, and then they invite guests, so they have other random celebrities show up. And like not nobody celebrities, well, some nobody celebrities too, but also like pretty sizable celebrities. Like I've seen Jamie Foxx was on there. They had Sean P. Diddy Combs. They had Usher. People that you know. At least I was able to know. And then also some other people that I didn't know. And then, each of them cooks a dish for this potluck, right? So Martha has one and Snoop has one, and then they kind of, have fun doing that. And then they'll usually have themes to each episode, and then they'll do some silly stuff with those. The Halloween-themed episode, they did some very silly-looking, like, oh, here's this, like, shrimp gelatin thing, and it kind of looks like brains, right?
Oh, okay.
And then they had like a toilet paper mummy race where they like toilet papered a person in the audience, right? Like did who could mummify the person faster. Snoop.
Is it also kind of like a hosting show where they then have whoever the guest is talk about their thing?
The guests did not spend a lot of time talking about things. Not that they didn't talk, but they more were on, like, if the guest wanted to talk about some kind of thing, they would mention it for like a sentence, or they would bring them one as a gift, right?
Oh,
it's like,
okay.
Like, oh, like Usher comes in and like he's here promoting his, like, his label of clothes, and look what he's wearing, and here's a box for you, Martha, and for you, Snoop. Like, stuff like that.
That's what I was wondering, yeah. Where's the promotional aspect for the guest,
sure,
I guess?
Sure, or like Jamie Foxx comes in and he has this alcohol brand, and here's like a bottle for each of you. This is so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And then Snoop says a prayer, and then they eat the food. And the audience looks like they get the food as well, because they all have an audience sitting at tables, like it was a dinner party.
Oh, okay.
And so then the meal that they eat also, I guess, in theory, goes out to the audience. And then they have like, a little more just like, they play like a fun kind of table kind of icebreaker game or whatever, usually every episode as well. And those are usually hilarious. And then maybe they have a musical guest, and then that's the end of the show. It's only 30 minutes. It's amazing.
When you see them together, how do you judge their interaction? Do you really believe the stories about how they're friendly or friends and all that sort of thing?
I mean, I don't know. They seem to be doing... If they don't actually get along, they're selling it well.
Right.
That's what I would say. The interaction between them comes off as genuine enough, whether it is or not, right? I don't know. Like, how much of the show is scripted? I'm sure most of it, right?
Yeah.
But it's still pretty good. You can definitely tell, like, that they set up a lot of the jokes so that because Martha is Martha, right? Like she is the butt of the joke by being Martha Stewart, right? And like Snoop being Snoop or something.
Uh-huh.
So they, in the Halloween episode, they made a dead body looking thing out of like candy and gummies and stuff. And all the guests were like, and then Martha shows off the finished one. Everyone's like, this is nasty. Like, we don't want to eat this. Like, that looks like intestines and stuff. And Martha's like, no, it's no big deal. It's just that she picks it up and start eating it. Everyone's like, oh, that kind of stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, it's very funny. Or I recommend that people, if you're looking for some very light, silly television, it is definitely that.
Perfect.
And the food looks good. I don't know. I've never tried making it, but it looks good. So
I wonder if he can cook. I mean, overall, it seems like he likes to, from what I've seen.
He definitely, has a lot of like, he's like, oh, these are my, my mom's favorite pork chop recipe, Snoop Dogfather chops or something. I don't know. He has dumb names for all his stuff, but just like Martha does, right?
Sure.
Except that Snoops are Snoop flavored. I like it very much. I think I don't know what else to say about it. I really enjoy how silly the interaction between them is. I laugh every time I watch it, and that's good.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need to turn off your brain.
Yes.
And that's okay. It's better than doing it to one of those housewife shows or something like that.
Yeah, it does have that kind of reality television air around it with the people that come on and stuff. They're just talking about, nothing essentially. But, if they can talk about nothing and still be funny, I'm okay with it.
Speaking of funny, I saw the new Thor movie.
It was funny? That's striking. I don't think I was prepared for that.
Yeah, I wasn't really entirely prepared for it either. I had heard a lot of varying reviews of people saying they didn't like it at all, or people saying it was, I heard the best Marvel movie over the weekend. Somebody said
okay,
that.
The best Marvel movie is
Somebody
a real high bar.
I'm just saying what I heard.
Okay.
It was certainly very funny. Very, very funny. I think that they got the message that last movie was kind of as much as they could really push the serious Thor stories before they got into this one, which is Thor Ragnarok.
I guess to be clear, that second Thor movie. Wait, this is the third one, right?
This is the third Thor movie,
and that second one I think is generally considered one of the worst Marvel movies. People do not like that movie much.
It was pretty bleak, and the storyline was just kind of a mess. And it really just seemed to not lead anywhere. I don't know. It was just not a great overall film, I guess.
Yeah, and there's some stuff in there as pertains to the greater cinematic universe, but it's kind of inessential otherwise. Oh,
it's very inessential. I don't think you even need to watch it at all.
Okay, so going into the third one, do they give you a hot recap since probably a lot of people didn't see it?
They recapped it in 2 lines. Then
awesome.
It was done. Yep. And you're like, oh yeah, that did happen in that last one. That's right. Okay, cool. And the way they recap it before that is a huge funny scene. And then they go through this really funny scene. And it's not a spoiler to say Loki's in the movie, he's in the trailer. But then they're like, Loki, why are you here? Remember that last movie when you shouldn't be here now?
Okay.
So that's kind of a funny little riff on that movie wasn't good, don't watch it.
Nice. Well, they really just went for it.
I mean, just think Guardians of the Galaxy level, not taking it seriously.
I really enjoyed that about Guardians of the Galaxy 1. So you're saying things that I like you to hear here.
I mean, Jeff Goldblum's in it, and he plays a grand master of a planet of trash. You can't. And Thor has a big storyline that I'm not going to get into because you haven't seen it. I don't want to spoil it for people, but to kind of accept what's going to happen with Thor, you need to be in a different mood because it's just it's starting to get to the point the Thor comics where you're kind of this is just too heavy or it's too unbelievable if you don't have that comic relief aspect to it. And they really took that to the next level, I think.
I remember at one point in the Thor comics, Asgard literally came to a physical place on Earth and was floating in Oklahoma or something.
That did happen in the comics. I think it was Oklahoma or Iowa for sure.
It was the Midwest somewhere is what I remember.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenes of the Asgardians jumping down out of the clouds and walking into the diner and having breakfast and being what is this bacon and eggs kind of stuff?
You have to kind of go, if you're going to go that over the top, you have to go over the top, right?
Yeah.
So that specifically does not happen in this movie.
Dang it. I was hoping for that.
Well, no, it's more about the what does Ragnarok mean, right?
Sure.
And how does it pertain to what's coming next in the Marvel universe as a greater whole? This one seems to not really set you up for it. There's no essential scene for the major motion picture other than getting Thor back out into space, really,
Okay. So, but, their things are very clearly moving toward what I don't think is a spoiler to say Infinity War, right? It's the name of the next Avenger movie?
Correct.
So,
I wouldn't call this a direct tie-in or anything. You just, you wouldn't need to see it to watch Infinity War, really. There's a lot of funny moments that they made a joke about Infinity War coming, right? Like an aside to the audience, like haha, funny sort of thing.
Cool. Well, I am very surprised to hear that it is like really funny because that is not what I expected.
It was hilarious. Yeah, I don't know how many of the trailer pieces you've seen for it, but you know, Hulk's in the movie too.
Yes, I have seen that he's in the movie from a trailer.
And the relationship between Hulk and Thor is just like over the top. The whole movie is over the top. I should stop saying that because the whole thing is just completely over the top. But they knew that going in, and it's great to have that self-awareness in a film like this. And I was trying to remember back to Guardians, right? Guardians was funny in that Drax, you know, he doesn't get sarcasm, and like Chris Pratt is Chris Pratt, and so he's going to carry the film with one-liners and funny looks and
right, because that's
joking
him.
Around, and that's kind of how they carried that movie.
Yeah,
but it was still at the end, you know, of the first Guardians movie when the whole crash into the planet thing is happening. It got real serious there.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, they go for the moment of levity very close at the end, but like, you know, yeah,
sure,
stuff gets real in that movie for sure.
When stuff gets real in this one, it's still over the top.
Okay, they're still laughing at how ridiculous it gets.
Oh man, and the closest thing I could make an analogy to is like the glory days of like 80s video games and stuff like that. The title sequences are all very video game like. They all have that like primary colors and action poses, and they look like miniature video game characters in those in the opening and closings. So it's
that is very good to hear. I'm kind of been on the fence about seeing it, but I will have to go check that out sometime in the next couple of weeks. Highly
recommend. Very enjoyable.
Well,
especially if like me, you kind of roll your eyes when the next Marvel movies come out.
Yeah, I don't know that I'm all the way that cynical about it, but you know, I wasn't a huge fan of Thor going into this, based on that second one, especially. So good to hear that they found a good place with this.
They kind of play with that too. That they kind of realize that no one loves Thor that much.
Okay. That's
no, I don't mean to say that like I don't like any of the Marvel movies. I rolled my eyes actually physically before the movie when they showed a trailer for the New Mutants series. And they're like, basically we've gotten to the point now that Marvel is its own sub-brand of films. And they're like, how do we make a horror Marvel movie? And how do we make comedy Marvel movies? And how do we make action Marvel movies? And how do we make science Marvel movies? You know, it's like...
Well, you know, it's funny that you bring that up as Marvel essentially using the trope of superheroes as a way to tell other kinds of stories, right? Because that's really what we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
There is another movie that you and I both have seen, I think, that I would like to talk about a little bit if you are interested.
Absolutely. I like movie casts.
Yeah, and it explores a little bit of a different trope of the, you know, sort of the android subservient race.
Ooh, are we going to talk about 2049?
I would like to talk about Blade Runner 2049, Andrew.
Yeah, finally. Spoilers?
I think I need to talk about spoilers in order to say what I want to say, so yes.
All right.
That's my opinion.
Here's the spoiler warning. We'll do the thing where I come back in later and tell you where to skip ahead. But, man, I really hope you people have seen 2049 because that is a good movie and I want to talk about it and I want to say spoiler stuff too.
Yes. If you haven't seen it, please go see it and then come back to this discussion.
Jump to 5620. All right.
So
you saw 2049.
I did see it. And it is I enjoyed it very much. You know, for you know, as being a fan of the first movie, though maybe not quite as big of a fan as you, I think.
I really like the first movie. I've seen it more times than I care to think about. All the versions.
I definitely have not seen it that many times, but I enjoyed it. I didn't quite remember everything about it before going to see this one, and I wished I had rewatched it again immediately after seeing this one.
Okay.
But we could talk about that later if you want. But this sort of, whereas the first movie, right, was sort of a noir movie, like a detective story being told using kind of a cyberpunk kind of theme around it.
Yeah, it definitely was like, it felt, I don't mean to say this because the story is deeper than this, but it definitely took what could have been a generic noir film and definitely put a skin over it that was the cyberpunky type skin without a ton of overly deep world building beyond the stories of the main characters.
Right. It felt like this one wasn't trying to do that as much as it was trying to tell more of a straightforward story about Officer K's life and sort of the greater, I don't know, results of what happened in the first movie.
So which one are you thinking was less richly built?
What?
Which one do you think is more richly designed, I guess?
So I think they both had a lot of design in them. And there's a lot of the cinematography in this movie, you can tell they spent a lot of time on. The colors, the sets and stuff are very intentionally designed in all the cases to evoke certain feelings. But this movie is a lot less busy is the wrong word, but it feels a lot more sparse. There's a lot less in it. Whereas the first movie, you were wandering through those crowded streets. It was very cramped. You would see the people wandering around, going about their clearly menial and awful jobs in this crowded, terrible town. And then, these people like Tyrell living in this literal pyramid, like a pharaoh over the enslaved race here. And the parallel in this movie, right? But he is lording over kind of an empty land, right? You don't ever see any of those people down on the ground in this movie, except for in a couple cases.
Yeah, just when
they're generally not there.
Yeah, when he's having that dinner or whatever, when he's sitting down below near the
and instead of like reveling in it like Decker did, right? Decker liked going out there, walking through the streets and stuff. You can see Kay does not feel like he's comfortable there. And, he leaves and goes back to his apartment to be alone with his AI girlfriend, wife thing. So, it sets a very different tone, especially when, they tell you Kay's a replicant right off the bat, essentially.
I loved that. I loved that we were just like, okay, we're here, and Kay's a replicant.
Yeah, you pretty much learn, almost immediately into the movie. Yeah, and the movie is long, I guess, it's worth saying. But I didn't feel that it was too long.
I actually thought that it was about the right length. Maybe you could cut 5 minutes, maybe you could add 5 minutes, but I really felt like for the story they laid out, if it had gone faster, I would have been a little lost.
I heard from an interview that I read after the fact that the first script they wrote was about 4 hours.
Whoa!
And obviously they didn't shoot all of that, but their initial take at the idea was going to take 4 hours. Obviously, This movie is not 4 hours,
thankfully.
But it was a long movie, and so they definitely had to pull some stuff. And I think the stuff that I heard was that there was a lot of connective tissue and dialogue that got pulled out, which actually kind of bums me out in a way, because the movie does have a lot of, there's an economy of words. It doesn't over-explain everything to you. In a lot of cases, it doesn't explain things to you at all. And kind of just lets you draw, sort of your own conclusions about what characters are thinking and feeling based on their, reactions on the screen. So, it is a really good one of those type of movies, right? Like it was nice to not have a movie talk down to me.
Oh my gosh, that was the first thing I noticed. Was like, okay, we're here, and in the very first scene, we're not getting explained like.
Well, we'll ignore there was a literal credit scroll at the beginning, or a title scroll where they're explaining things to you. But outside of that, outside of
the title scroll, when we're sitting down in that scene, which makes me, oh man, so much to talk about. But when the two replicants, Kay and I can't remember the other replicant's name, or
the farmer we're talking about,
are sitting there talking to each other. They don't talk to each other like they have to explain the story to each other like most people do, right? Like,
and most people in movies, you mean?
Yeah, most people in movies, they sit there and they explain each other's story to each other. It's like these guys already know each other's story because they're both replicants and they both know why they're there.
Yeah,
so they have the discussion that
Kay
they both know what's coming.
And Kay just says like, "Please let me just take you in," and then there's no dialogue before that, essentially, right? Like it's just like, hi. It's like, please let me take you in. And it's like
just be easy. I don't,
Yeah.
And the things that the replicant, the Nexus 6, Nexus 7?
I think he was a 6. So I think the way it goes is he was a 6, but K is an 8?
K is an 8.
Right. So the 7 seems to have been skipped over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the feelings you get from that scene are that I'm not going to get talked down to from the moment we get going here. We're going to have to figure things out as they happen, right?
Right. No one is going to tell you what Kay's deal is. You're just going to have to figure it out because Kay knows his own deal and doesn't have to tell you.
And more so than when we met our anti-hero the first time around, Deckard. We meet him and he's the noir detective on the street, grimy, getting noodles, and you can tell he's a drunk and doesn't want to do his job.
Right. Like, you learn a lot about his character in that very first scene.
Right. And we also learn a ton about Kay in our very first scene, which is that he is not going to be Rick Deckard, and he's also going to be kind of the just analytical-ish mind for most of the movie. He's going to be a vessel to carry us into the story.
He also seems like he's a lot more interested in going by the book and doing things that he's told.
Well, we're told at the beginning that he's required to.
Well, you get the impression that he is doing by the book because he sort of feels like he has to, right?
Right. Which, again, we're told, but who knows if it's true.
Right. So the idea of whether, and this is kind of the stuff that I think that the movie hints at a lot of stuff and doesn't maybe necessarily delve too deep into it, which is kind of the failing, I think, of the movie. It has a lot of ideas and doesn't really engage with a lot of them. The idea of, is this, these Nexus 8s, the new breed of replicants, right? The Wallace even says are perfectly subservient, right? Like they will follow commands, right? That's the whole idea. Whereas the older ones had had more free will. These ones are just slaves, essentially, right?
That's what we're told,
right? But then you wonder, is it the movie brings up the idea? Do they actually? Is this just the slaves having bought into the idea that they're slaves and they're not actually, that they're just following the thought pattern because that's all they've ever been told? Everyone says they're a slave, so they think that they're a slave. They never have tried to exercise free will because they believe they don't have it. I think that
the first movie, people give the first movie too much credit in this aspect of things. We've had 25 years to analyze that movie.
Oh, undoubtedly.
And sit back and think, well, if they had said this in this scene, then it would mean this. But if they had said this in this scene, it would mean this. But they didn't say anything, right?
Right.
And again, I think that this movie did the same thing, where what did it take for Kay to lie to his, what do you call her, matron? the police chief that he reports to.
The lieutenant, like the police.
Yeah, but he calls her matron or something like that, right?
I don't remember what the term he used. Anyway,
so he lies to her,
right,
about having taken care of the problem, right, that she sees,
right,
that she wants him to hide all the evidence about. It didn't take anything for him to lie,
right?
There's no reprogramming, there's no nothing. It's just he saw something that he thought maybe would be too important to solve right away by telling her, like he wanted to solve it.
Sure.
And so his nature as this sort of detective figure takes over, and he can't not solve it without, he can't report that he's not gonna do what she asked.
And he also has a bit of self-preservation there too, right? Where he knows if this person is going to be a problem, right? Because that's what the lieutenant is worried about. They have the potential to blow this whole thing wide open, and there's going to be all these riots and whatever. Mm-hmm. Well, if that person is going to be a problem, and he, at that point in the movie, kind of thinks it's him, that might be that person, right? Mm-hmm. Well, he thinks, I'm not going to be that problem. Problem is solved, right?
Or is self-preservation enough to break the cycle, right? So I think these questions are in the movie, and I think they're answered well enough in the movie to have a debate, and that's what the first movie did. And I don't think that I want more than what they did. I don't want them to lay out every single answer to every conundrum that comes up.
Right. I agree.
Because a lot of them are moral arguments that we're still having today,
Yeah. It's not the idea that I don't want them to present the definitive answer to the question. That's not, I don't want that either, to be clear. The movie is good because it has ambiguity in, some of the statements and the postures it takes. But it also doesn't dig very deep into those subjects, right? For instance, the new, the new Voight-Kampff test, right?
Yeah.
In the old movie, they had these close-ups of people's eyes, and they would tell them all these weird, lurid stories and stuff, and then measure their responses in order to determine if they were a replicant or not. Well, now it's just an app on your smartphone, and you just point it at their eye or whatever, and you're all good. Like, it's a very, we know we needed this because we established it, and, we're just going to skim over the stuff, which was very interesting about those tests in the first movie. And now we just kind of that stuff is not what we're trying to do here, so we're going to do this.
No, I think that's another, I disagree, because they're identifying a Nexus 6. You're 2 generations behind. They can do that now without doing all the tests. But to understand the Nexus 8 and what's happening with them, he has to go in and be asked a whole bunch of questions to establish his base, right? They've added a different type of thing.
So I guess I was separating the idea between the baselining stuff and the actual test to determine if someone that you didn't know was a replicant or not.
Oh, am I conflating the two? Because I feel like they're connected.
And maybe they are. I don't know. But
it seemed
the
look
rapid
at
fire,
K, right?
Right.
He doesn't act like a replicant, look like a replicant. Like some of the replicants, they had that kind of hulking form, and they were built for being off-world miners or all these sorts of things. Yeah. You can just pick them out of a crowd because a lot of them look the same. But K, they don't ever show another K. They don't look anybody that looks like K. How does everyone on the street know he's his skin job, as they say, right? Everybody in his apartment building knows. Everybody, they all know. So something has happened in this society where people are able to pick out replicants easily and quickly.
Yeah. I wonder... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is there's some kind of identification that they don't really discuss, and people just know, or some kind of thing that they have that tells them or makes them, apparent to a person. Something
happened, and that's why I kind of thought it was nice that they left it off a little bit. There's this, gap in between the last movie and this movie. A lot of stuff's happened. Let's just move on. Here's this new thing to establish baselines for our replicant.
Sure.
And that's fascinating to me, imagining all the replicants have to go through,
Yeah, the the sort of the way that test is formulated, it's very fast. They tell you this, like, you know, kind of these brief snippets of a tragic story, and then an unrelated word at the end, and they force you to repeat that unrelated word over and over while having no reaction, essentially, to the rest of the story, right?
Right.
And, you know, it's very, you know, it's the same idea with the smartphone, you know, test, is that it's just very quick and it gets the job done, you know, in a very brief time. But they want to make sure it's done in a setting where then, you know, if obviously the person is dangerous, they can hold them there. And so they do it in these clinical white rooms.
What I really liked about some of the stuff that you're mentioning and the ambiguity is that the movie took, I think, two separate issues and layered them on top of each other. And that's where we end up in a little bit of confusion land, right? Mm-hmm. So we're talking about the nature of artificial life, right? And the moral aspects of giving it its own leeway to live and grow, especially when you look at like Joy and all these other scenarios where you have to start wondering, like, does Joy really feel? Does she really exist? And you've got that layer to this film, as well as like when you take Blade Runner 1, and that's about slavery, right? And the crisis of a world where they can't sustain slavery anymore, morally, and because of upcoming basic slave revolt, right? That Roy started and was finished in between this movie and Blade Runner 2049. And in 2049, they've moved into essentially indentured servitude.
Or even sharecropping.
Right?
I mean...
Oh, you're not slaves anymore. You're indentured servants. You're out working. You're out earning. You have your own choices you can make as long as they're what humans say.
Oh, I didn't read it that way at all. It just seemed like they were trying to start the plantation up again, almost.
I didn't read it as the plantation again, right? Like, I read it. I definitely felt like, oh wow, okay, so Kay has his own apartment. They know he's a replicant and he has his own apartment. You know, irrespective of what you think about Deckard in the first movie and all that. But they know he's a replicant and he has that own apartment. But he spends probably all of his money on Joy, and you can kind of tell that when he says that he got her the birthday or the present, right? And it's the little mobile thing, and it clearly like is very expensive, and he doesn't do anything except work and go home.
Right.
So I feel like,
but you know, is that so? Like, you know, the idea then is that Kay making those choices, or did they tell him to do that? Like, here's where you're going to live. You can go between here and here. This is your job.
Again, indentured servitude, right? Like, oh, you can't afford to make choices outside of myself, or like in his case, he supposedly thinks he can't make choices outside of that. The idea of, oh, you're a free living thing, but at the same time you're not.
Yeah, I guess I just see it as, you know, more of there's still the master above calling the shots, right? In Kay's case, the lieutenant and the rest of the police department and the law.
So that's where I wonder, right?
Decide that he is going to do this, and this is where he's going to live, and this is how he can conduct his job, right?
So that's where I wonder, did he get to choose where he lived? Because it seems like it. He doesn't live in a block of replicants, right? He doesn't live in a controlled area. Because if you thought, like, oh, you're a slave, then why don't they all just sleep in mattresses in the police station? Or, you know, point being, to me, it seemed open enough that, like, when you start to wonder, can Kay make a decision that is against his orders? Maybe we're talking about indentured servitude, where someone thinks they can't do anything beyond what they're told, but they could.
I guess I just don't see that line as really exist. Like, if I don't see that much of a difference between an indentured servant and a slave, really. It's just that capitalism is enslaving them as opposed to,
right? Yeah,
you know, an all-powerful person.
Absolutely, and that adds another layer, right?
Right.
Because if it's capitalism enslaving them, then that makes sense why there's the revolution.
Sure. And you definitely hear it, whether Kay or Joy or really anyone in this movie is actually intending to be revolutionary is like maybe a separate and kind of not really addressed thing in the movie.
Sure. And whether they're programmed to do it is a whole nother thing, right?
Sure, right. Is this some kind of, is this life finding a way, or is this all some kind of master plan by Tyrell or even Wallace or Love even, right? The Wallace's assistant, is she doing stuff on her own? I mean,
or what's her name now? I'm going to have to look it up because I want to say the correct name.
Which character?
Deckard's daughter.
Oh, the memory implanter. Yeah. What is her name?
Yeah, exactly. Anna Stelline. Anna?
Yeah,
the doctor that puts the memories in to the replicants. Like, she left that memory in K, or possibly more than K. If she left it in more than K, did she do it on purpose, thinking this could break the cycle? This could, does she know that she is replicant adjacent? I don't know. Like, right? There's a question there also. Why? Yeah. How did that memory leak out into the replicants? Was it on purpose or not?
Yeah, we sort of don't know, right? And whether the idea of that person, like, does she even want to be part of a revolution? Like, you kind of...
I don't get that impression.
Yeah, I don't think you really get the impression that she's, like, behind the scenes leading it.
No.
So, and then is this just the replicants using people, starting the cycle over again by using someone else as their pawn in their game, right? Mm-hmm. It's I think there's a lot this movie goes into a lot. We could have like a 5-hour discussion about this, I think, if we wanted.
Sure. And the differences between the movies are fun in a way that...
Yes, agreed.
You get so nervous for Deckard at certain points in the first movie, and it's mainly because Deckard has to use his mind to escape a scenario, or he can't escape. Like when at the very end, right? He there's no reason he can escape Roy. He has to just keep running for his life.
Right.
And you're nervous there because you don't know how he's going to escape, and they shoot the scene really well. Or you get nervous when you and Rick Deckard have figured out who the replicant is at the adult entertainment bar, but does she know that he knows, and that sort of thing.
Right.
It's very noir nervousness, right? But in this movie, they were like, okay, we still have to make people nervous, but this time we're gonna, K is a Nexus 8. He's gonna be able to fend for himself, so we have to make them nervous in different areas. And like that boiling pot at the beginning, right? It's boiling the whole time, mm-hmm. and that just gets you amped up, and or when Love and Kay are fighting at the end and the water's coming up, and you just get so nervous for the way they shoot in this movie. And so it's like it's weird that they kept you on your seat, but like you said, it's not as noir drama-y as it was before.
Sure, the story is not, but they still it still tells a tense story. It's just that the sort of like grim detective part of it is not so front and center, right?
Right, but at the end, that's a good point. Yeah, it's more tense than it was. It's as equally tense, but for a different reason, and that's cool.
And like a lot of the tension in this movie and in the first movie comes in, like scenes where, like for instance, when Deckard and Wallace are together in that room with the light there, it's slowly rotating. In Wallace's like office or whatever.
Yeah.
Null zone play. No person could ever work in an office like that. What the heck?
Look, every scene with Wallace is just kind of an eye roll.
Yeah, but that scene, there's a lot of just like, you can't see a character's face to see his reaction to the last line that was said until the light slowly pans over their face, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what he thought about what that guy just said. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of, that it's a tense moment trying to see, is he going to be happy? Is he going to be, how does he feel about what just happened here?
Yeah.
Like I said, I really appreciated the cinematography and stuff in this movie. It really, the shots and stuff were just incredible.
Oh, yeah. It's beautiful to look at. And I wish before talking about it, I'd seen it a second time because I think it holds up, I think, to the original. It's different, but it holds up in terms of, I don't think it's as shallow as some of the complaints about it make it seem.
I would be really interested to hear what the consensus and the thoughts are about this movie in 5 years, right? Like because it took so long for people to digest that first movie and for it to sort of reach the cult status that it has now.
Yeah, it was a complete flop, just like this one.
I would love to know what people think about this movie 5 years from now after they had a lot of time to digest it and think about it critically.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. Because I think there's a lot of layers, like talking about if experiences make life or if, what makes life and bringing Rachel into this mix of, okay, well, is it the same to have the same, she's a computer, right? Or is she not a computer because the Rachel we know lived and this other Rachel didn't? And, is Joy making decisions or is she just a program?
Is she making decisions because she's been programmed to love him? And so is it her choice to make that decision?
She's obviously been programmed to love it, but does she make decisions because of the program or in spite of the program, right?
Right, yeah, exactly.
And so I think that those things bear repeat viewings to decide whether they were well written and whether they go deep enough and whether there's just enough ambiguity to try and create arguments or not. And I liked that about it enough to say that I like it.
And I agree with that. Just really quick, I want to shout out another podcast that I listened to that came at it from a very different perspective than you and I have. The Waypoint Radio did a spoiler cast on Blade Runner 2049. That's Vice Gaming's podcast, and they have very different perspectives from us. There are people of color on that podcast, and they have a different perspective. And they come, and women have another perspective who are on there. So I think that's a really good listen. There's a lot more issues in this movie, I think, than people are thinking about on the surface. And,
sure.
While Andrew and I maybe can't speak to all of those, people are starting that thought process, so, and I will be interested to hear, the sort of what the voices say about this movie in, the next years to come.
Absolutely. Oh, I think that's a good place to leave off the movie time.
Yeah. Let's switch gears a little bit. Andrew, how did your fantasy football week go here before we close out?
I have specifically been avoiding it till this moment. This doesn't count as research. I'm going to open up my game. Scores? I'm going to open up my game that was neck and neck within 5 points. Oh, I lost. Awesome.
Oh.
I was up 100 to 95, and I have now lost. Thank you. Ugh, Waterboy.
Well, I won by 1 point. So
you won by what?
1 point.
Marvin Jones.
Matt Stafford.
Marvin Jones got 22 points, and Golden Tate got 11, and I lost by 5.
Bummer. Well, the close victory in this league was tempered by a surprising defeat in one of my other leagues. So, I sort of broke even here this week.
Yeah, I broke even as well. I don't really know what to do to fix that scenario, having lost Watson this week, and I filled in fine with Prescott, but yeah, if I'd gotten any points from my defense, maybe it was a different week. I don't know. This season I broke 100 again and then lose. I don't really have a good bead, I guess, is what I'm trying to say on this season right now. It seems like every team is just falling apart around the edges, but some teams just keep crushing the points, and I don't quite understand it. Like Jameis Winston's now going to sit, which means Mike Evans has no more value. Will Fuller no longer has value because Deshaun Watson is gone. So it's like every
Right.
week you're losing 4 or 5 players. There's really nobody stepping up on the waiver wire that you want to pick up because the teams that those people are on are collapsing around them. And yet there are teams like in our league that are still just crushing in points. So I don't understand how they're completely unaffected.
I think this has been a very brutal year for injuries, and not just that people get injured every year in the NFL a lot, right? That's not unusual, but the people that are getting injured are high profile this year, and that's not always true.
Yeah,
there's been multiple, a bunch of teams this year that have lost their first string quarterback, which is a big deal. And these are not just, not necessarily small market teams. These are huge teams, national teams, right? So, it's been a tough year for fantasy football. And, we're not over yet. So we'll see what happens. The teams that people thought were going to be good have not turned out to be the teams people thought they were. That's for sure.
Yeah, no joke. And the teams that started looking like they were going to be good are now bad again. So I don't know. All right. Let's get out of here. Where can people send us awesome emails about Snoop and Martha and whatever they think about that show?
Well, you can hit us up at podcast@weweregamers.com, an email address that we read, although it may take us a couple episodes to get to them sometimes. And also follow us on Facebook, facebook.com/weweregamers, @weweregamers on Instagram and Twitter. You can check out all our cool BlizzCon photos that we posted up on those places. Give us a follow, rate us on iTunes, all that good stuff.
Yeah, right on, everybody, and we'll be back soon.